Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to the rustic Vaughn Lodge and the Wild West Kitchen. I was going to film this outside, but it's really windy out there and cold, so I'm in the cozy kitchen. The cozy kitchen at the Vaughn Lodge. Well, what do? Perfect place to film this video and do my announcement for June. June on the Range, yes. June on the Range, a whole month devoted to Westerns and Western fiction. So June on the Range is an idea I came up with because I wanted to read more Westerns, and I've read a lot of Westerns in my life, but it's been a while. And I wanted to give all of you an excuse to read Westerns. It's a chance to read Western fiction, which, frankly, not many people do that much anymore. Westerns used to be huge, but they have fallen off in popularity quite a bit compared to what they used to have. Used to be really popular Westerns. One of the most common genres you'd see would be Westerns. No longer. That's okay. They're still out there. And it's been a while since I've read any Westerns, actually, and I used to read them all the time. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of Western films. I'm a big fan of a lot of the old Western TV shows. And I love Western fiction. So it's a great chance to do that, and for you, my wonderful friends, to read a Western or two. Basically, June on the Range is going to be real easy. You don't have to go whole hog like I'm going to do. I'm just going to spend the whole month of June just reading Westerns, and that's it. But I want to make this accessible. I want to give you a chance to give you an excuse to read some Westerns, especially if you haven't read Westerns before. So you can either you could read as many as you want, and I encourage you to do so. If you want to be crazy like me and just spend the whole month reading Westerns, right on. But otherwise, all I ask is that you read a couple short Westerns or one long Western being about 500 pages, or a short Western being however long short Westerns are. And a lot of the older Westerns tend to be short. And you can still find the old-timey Westerns in used bookstores like everywhere. Because like I said, there's a lot of old paperback Westerns floating around because it used to be a huge genre. So you'll still find those battered old paperbacks from the old days through the 50s and 70s when people used to read Westerns all the time. And there are newer Westerns, of course, out there still. And I'll talk a little bit about that. I'm going to talk about what I'm going to be reading. I'm not dividing this up into any kind of categories, like some events that you'll see on BookTube, because it's a little harder to do with Westerns. And I do want to make this really accessible. So just any kind of Western is fine. If it seems Westerny, good. So I'm going to talk about some of the things that I'm going to read. Now, I'm not going to read all of these books that I pulled, but I'm going to read from these books. I'm going to try to read them all, but it's probably impossible with my work schedule. I'll read as many as I can in June. So let me just show you some of the Westerns I'm going to read, and I'll talk a little bit about them. I'm only going to concentrate on Westerns I actually have not read yet. One that I have read, but I just wanted to point it out just to show you that it exists, because it's a popular writer, and not many people have heard of this book. This is The Memoirs of Wild Bill Hickok by Richard Matheson. Richard Matheson, who's best known for his science fiction and horror novels. He wrote The Shrinking Man, and he wrote I Am Legend. That's probably his most popular book, which a lot of people talk about on BookTube. But he wrote Westerns, which a lot of people don't talk about on BookTube. And this one is particularly good. The Memoirs of Wild Bill Hickok. He wrote this. He wrote a book called Journal of the Gun Years, which is fantastic. Journal of the Gun Years is one of my favorite books. Not just my favorite Westerns, but one of my favorite books. So I'm just going to throw this up here and show you guys. It does have a sticker a lot of these old paperbacks have stickers on them from the various bookstores that they've been in. So on to the books that I have not read that I'm hoping to read. The first one is another Richard Matheson book. This is a Richard Matheson novel that I've never read, and I'm really excited to read it. This is Shadow on the Sun by Richard Matheson. Don't know much about this book. I just know it's a Western novel by Richard Matheson, one of my favorite writers that I have not read. So I'm definitely going to get to this right away. This is one of those books I'm definitely going to read for June on the Range. Shadow on the Sun. Another book that I'm going to try to get to is by Mary Doria Russell, which is Doc, which is a novel about Doc Holliday, which I only heard through a comment here on BookTube where it was recommended to me. And so I got it right away because it sounded fantastic. And I've heard good things about this writer. So this is a newer Western. I don't know when it was written, but it's newer than some of these others. Was this the early 2000s? I'm just going to see because I can't remember. Yeah, it was 2011 when this was written. So this is a newer Western compared to some of the other stuff I'm going to be reading. But I'm definitely going to get to this at some point, hopefully in June. Now, a lot of these other Westerns I'm going to show you are a lot more of the old-timey, vintagey stuff. One is from Zane Grey. Zane Grey is one of the most popular of the older Western writers. This is Shadow on the Trail. Famously, Zane Grey wrote Riders of the Purple Sage and a ton of other Western novels, and a lot of baseball novels that many people do not read anymore. So this is Zane Grey's Shadow on the Trail. It's got a very, very typical Western cover that has probably been used on, a dozen books. They used to recycle these covers over and over again on these old Westerns. But this one's Shadow on the Trail by Zane Grey. Zane Grey, who was, like I said, very popular in the 30s, 20s and 30s, I believe. Robert E. Howard was a big fan of Zane Grey. So I want to at least get one Zane Grey book in. And next, we have the most popular Western writer of all time. It was tough to find, among the books that I own, some books by this writer that I have not read yet, but I came up with a couple. This is Crossfire Trail by Louis L'Amour. Louis L'Amour, who was huge. He was huge. He was one of the biggest writers in the world for a while. Not so much anymore. But if there are bookstores that still have Western sections, if they still exist, and they do in some bookstores, half of the shelf is going to be Louis L'Amour because he was so popular. And he wrote so much. He wrote quick, this guy, and you could often tell that he wrote quick. He could be a little sloppy sometimes, but that's okay because he was really good and really entertaining. He was a really entertaining Western writer. A lot of fun, Louis L'Amour usually. This is Crossfire Trail, a great old Western cover. Haven't read this one, so I'm looking forward to that. And another one I've had here at the Lodge forever, and I've always kind of meant to pick up but haven't, is The Man from the Broken Hills, which is sort of connected to the Sackett saga, his famous saga of the Sackett family. I don't think this is officially part of that. I've read most, if not all of those books, but I haven't read this. So The Man from the Broken Hills. Gonna read this one. One I'm really looking forward to because the cover is just so awesome. It's from a writer that I like. Is from Wayne D. Overholser, who wrote so many Westerns. This is Buckskin Man. Buckskin Man. Wayne Overholser was pretty good. But I haven't read this one, Buckskin Man. I don't know if it's possible to read all this guy's Westerns. You'll find a lot of this guy's Westerns floating around out there. So Buckskin Man. And then I've got this one, which has 2 novels in it. They're pretty short, these books. This one has The Violent Land and The Judas Gun. I'm kind of surprised that I haven't read this one yet, but I haven't. So I'm definitely going to read these. I'm hoping. We'll see. Like I said, there's no way I'm going to get to all these in real life, just because of how much time I have. But you never know. You never know. I could think big. I always do, and I always disappoint myself. But that's okay. Here's an Al Cody Western. This is Trail North. Trail North from Al Cody. So I'm going to read that one. This one is from Nelson C. Nye, and I don't think I've read this one. I was looking at this. Have I read this? I don't think so. This is Born to Trouble by Nelson C. Nye. I've read a lot of these guys' books, but I don't think this is one of them, because I think I was saving this to read, and I just never got to it. So Born to Trouble, excellent old-timey Western cover, great vintage Western cover, Born to Trouble. This is right here is from one of my favorite Western writers, Luke Short. And I don't think I've read this one. This is Bounty Guns from Luke Short. I like Luke Short a lot. I've read a lot of Luke Short's books. He's really good. It's been sold a couple times, you can see. They didn't even bother taking the old price off. They just put a new one on. So Bounty Guns from Luke Short. Here's the one I intended to read, but I haven't got to. This is from Ed Gorman, who is the winner of the Spur Award. I don't know if it was for this book. I don't think so. But this is Graves Retreat. This is an old leisure Western, which I have never read. It's another one that I picked up, intended to read, and never read it. And it's been sitting around for years and years and years and years at the Manor. And so, yeah, hopefully in June I'll get a chance to read it. Now this one is of great historical interest because it's Hopalong Cassidy, which I've never read. Clarence E. Mulford wrote a few Hopalong Cassidy novels. This is the only one I have. This was published by Tor. And Hopalong Cassidy was kind of a Western franchise for a while back in the old days. Louis L'Amour wrote some Hopalong Cassidy books under a pseudonym that were republished in the 90s, 80s and 90s or something, and that's when this was republished as well, the original Hopalong Cassidy books. So I want to read at least one of them just to see what they were like, because I never read the Hopalong Cassidy books. So I should, I ought to. Here is a book that became a famous Clint Eastwood movie, The Outlaw Josie Wales, which was a decent film from what I remember. It's been a while since I've seen it. In fact, I think the last time I saw this movie, I was just a kid. But I remember it being a decent Western movie. I don't know why I haven't seen it since then. But The Outlaw Josie Wales, this is by Forrest Carter. He wrote a couple Josie Wales books. And I think I've got another one. I think I've got the second one somewhere. But I definitely want to read the first one. Will I read it in June? We'll see. We'll see. Only a couple left. Here's a double book, another double, the Signet brand double Western. This is from Ray Hogan. This is from Ray Hogan's Shawn Starbuck series. So this was a series of Western novels that would come out once every couple months or something. The Rimrocker and the Outlawed by Ray Hogan. Ray Hogan's pretty good. He's a pretty good writer. He wrote some pretty good Western novels, and these are pretty good. I'm going to, now in the last week, no matter how much of this other stuff I've read, at some point towards the end of the last week, I'm going to start a book that I'm not going to finish until July. Jane Austen July has been canceled for me. I was going to read some Jane Austen, but tragically, I'm going to have to put off Jane Austen July till next year, because I'm going to finish up June on the Range by starting a Mammoth, because, I'm trying to read Mammoths this year. And that's going to be a book that I'm shocked I haven't read, Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry, which CriminOlly recently read and reviewed. And he, like everybody else in the world, talks about how great this book is. So I can't wait to read this book, Lonesome Dove. And at the last tail end of June on the Range, I'm going to start it. And I'm looking forward to reading this one because all my life I've been hearing how good this was. I remember when this came out, my dad was reading it and he said, you know, you should read this book. And I'm like, sure, Dad, I'll get right to it. But yeah, I'm going to. However many years later. Yeah, I'm finally going to get to this at the end of June on the Range. So that's what I'm going to read. Like I said, all I ask of you is to read maybe 2 short books or, you know, 1 I'm dropping westerns or 1 decent sized book, you know. That's all. Just to give it a try, just for fun. Or if you want to go, you know, all the way, that's what I'm going to do. So yeah, I hope you join up with me for June on the Range. Let me know in the comments down below if you're interested, if you'll be joining me for June on the Range. It's going to be excellent. I've got some other fine folks who are joining me for June on the Range, and I'll be linking their channels down below if I remember. I should remember. I can remember things now and again if I write them down. So yeah, June on the Range. I hope you join me. It's going to be a fine old time. Okay, guys, I will catch you next time. Sorry the Sunday Penguin wasn't up today, but I have another video I have to put up later on today about the Avengers. So I can't put out too many videos in one day. Sunday Penguin will be back next week when I'm at the Manor. Okay, guys, I will catch you next time.